I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's the author of several books, no other than Mr. David Fradin. Welcome back, Mr. David Fradin, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
So born in Detroit, Michigan, found under the cabbage Jeffrey Bodine and Beverly Hillbillies. Went to the University of Michigan. Eventually went to work for Hewlett Packard and Apple, and then I've had my own business since 1991.
Mr. David or David Fradin, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. And today, let's talk about one of your book. So, what is it, Mr. David?
My father's name was Hyman, and sometimes went by the nickname of Hymie. And one of my cousins somehow came across a number of letters that he wrote home during World War II when he served in the military. And so I put them together in a book called Letters from My Hymie, um, not to be confused with other books like the Vagina Monologues. And he was a very humorous writer, but he became a plumber. So I put together a book called A Little First Person History of Immigration from Ukraine, which is where my grandfather came from, to the New World, World War II, Disneyland, and beyond. He was an awesome humorist, but became a plumber.
So, Mr. David, what is the central theme of Letters from My Hymie, and how does it shape the
It's a,
story?
it's a biographical sort of history of a first person view of what was going on in the United States and the world, and the situation against Jews in the Ukraine in the 1800s and 1900s. It also contains an 18-page dictated autobiography from my grandfather on how he escaped the Russia-Japanese War by burning his lungs with acidic acid, to becoming the blacksmith for the governor of Kiev, to be given money by the governor and told to get out of the country before the ninth pogrom started and he would get killed.
So, how does the book explore themes of love, loss, and redemption?
Well, as he was serving during World War II, and by the way, the reason I put the book together is that he was a good writer, and his older brother, Morris, encouraged him to write and to send query letters to possible publishers for articles like the Washington Post and so forth, because he grew up in Washington, D.C. But he didn't like sending out query letters because he couldn't handle the rejection. So he always wanted to get published, and this is my little tribute to him to get him published.
So, Mr. David, what time period does the book cover, and how does it impact the story?
It covers a period from 1880 through the 1970s. Predominantly, as I mentioned, a little bit of his growing up in Baltimore and Detroit, businesses that his grandfather had, his father had, and his father's experiences in Ukraine before leaving and immigrating to the United States. And then up to 1944, when he met my mother as a Army truck driver in Detroit, Michigan. They got married, gave birth to me after my sister. And then it covers a trip that we took when I was 13 to throughout the United States. We drove all the way out to Disneyland from Detroit and back again up through San Francisco. So little funny things that happened along that whole journey that he had from when he was born in 1917 until he passed away in 2003.
So, how did you use your personal letters to create an emotional connection with the reader?
Well, the letters described what his life was like as he was stationed, like in Guantanamo Bay and in Quantico and in Camp Forest in Tallahassee, in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Some of his work, because he was fluent in Yiddish, which is close to German, as an interpreter for the interrogations of the German prisoner of war soldiers. So it's pretty much a chronological, biographical type history with little insights of the personal things that were going on during that period in history.
So, Mr. David, what are the major life lessons conveyed through Jaime's letters?
The difficulty of life back in the 40s and 50s, the even more difficulty of life in the Ukraine, where his father grew up. And the interesting thing is that uh, my grandfather was a shop owner. He owned a grocery store, a furniture store, and then my dad's siblings also owned things like hardware stores and liquor stores. So they were quite entrepreneurial. Most of them started out with nothing in this country and were able to accumulate some level of comfort.
So, what are the major lessons conveyed?
That it's important to have a sense of humor through all of this, a sense of humility, a sense of empathy for your fellow man, and a wonder of the grandeur of nature.
Grandeur. I love that. Wow. Thank you for sharing the letter, Mr. David. And what emotions are most prominently explored in the book and how they are conveyed?
Well, they're conveyed in my dad's personal words, like his experience after he was in the Marines. They discharged him because of his flat feet, and he felt bad about wandering the streets as an able-bodied young man in 1941 when World War II was starting in the United States. And he signed up, got into the Marines. They discharged him, and then he went back in 43 in the Marines, excuse me, in the Army, and they put him into the infantry of all places. So he got a check from the Veterans Administration, disability check of $10 a month for the rest of his life because it aggravated his flat feet.
So, how does the book highlight the importance of communication in relationships?
It was letters that he wrote to his family back in Washington, D.C., to his older brother, Morris, who was the librarian for the U.S. Navy. And Morris went on to write a book, a children's book about life on the Erie Canal, which was the prime mode of transportation from Buffalo, New York, to Washington, D.C., until the railroads came along and put the Erie Canal out of business. And so it talks about things like uh, Morris's daughter, Dorna, had a doctor come to him and say, I'd like to take your daughter as my wife. In exchange for that, I'll do an x ray on one of the members of the family for free. It covers those kinds of things. The problems that Morris had when he would work 6 days a week for the Navy and only get paid for five. There was also a letter in there from Jaime's brother, Jack, who was in the Army. He was also an all star catcher. So he played baseball in the Army and traveled around the country, including to England just before D Day, to play baseball there for the amusement of the troops. And he discusses in intimate detail the training he went through in terms of maneuvers as being a scout, having to find his commanding officers and convey instructions from their commanding officers while maneuvering through the countryside. I think he was in Ohio at the time. And how angry he was when he was in England that his mother had passed away, and because of Hitler, he was unable to be at his mom's side at the time of her passing.
So, Mr. David, how does letters from My Hymie reflect on family dynamics and personal growth?
Well, my father was one of six siblings, and he stayed in close touch with them through these letters. Today, I suppose we do that in email, and they would
Yes.
write back and forth and tell each other what's going on in their lives. It also contains some love letters that he wrote to my mother at the anniversary of when they got married in December 1944. And it also talks a little bit about her struggle with breast cancer and her attempts to get better.
What historical or cultural context woven into the book itself?
Respect for each of the family members.
Yes, definitely. Respect each other. So, how does the book balance nostalgia with the realities of life's challenges?
It goes chronologically and bounces back and forth between each of those.
Certainly. And what role does faith, tradition, or spirituality play in the story?
I suspect the Jewish religion plays in there. Most people don't understand the Jewish religion. It's actually a series of thou shalls and thou shall nots, which teaches people how to live with other people and treat other people and treat the environment. Um, so it's not a cult, it's a way of life. And it's something that was infused in the entire family, which includes how they treated each other.
So, Mr. David, how do the letters serve as a source of comfort or wisdom for the recipient?
Well, I think there's some lessons learned in there about life and the importance of life and uh, to value every minute that you have while you're healthy and alive. My mom struggled with breast cancer for 9 years. Her older sister, like many Ashkenazi Jews, had breast cancer and died from that. And just cherish the life that you have and take care of other people.
So, what writing style did you use to bring the letters and their messages to life?
It was narrative in nature, and I would describe the historical context of what was going on in the world around each of the dates of the letters. So a letter date might be like December 11th, 1941. So here he's conveying his feelings after the Pearl Harbor attack. Or it may be a letter in 1944 where after he met my mother, Celia, but he had to wait until after the war ended to get married. But he jumped the gun. He got married in December of 44, and the war didn't end until 1945. So those kinds of interesting historical waypoints are described before and after each of the letters.
So, what is the most powerful or moving letter in the book and why?
I think it was his full love for my mom and how much he appreciated her.
So, Mr. David, how many letters are there?
Probably about 2 to 3 dozen. I haven't actually counted the number.
Hmm, interesting. And how does the book portray personal resilience and perseverance through adversity?
Well, I think as it describes my mother's struggle with breast cancer, and there's the end of her life. She said nobody will see my face again, but I published a picture of her face.
Hmm, awesome. That's awesome. So, Mr. David, what would be your advice for those people out there want to write their own story, their novels, or their memoir?
Well, you have to pick the structure that you're going to use. In my case, I picked pretty much a chronological structure. And then I also put in there some background information about myself, some acknowledgments to my sister, to my mother, to my cousin, Diane, who saved the letters and sent them to me. So you have to pick the style in which you want. And one of the things I found as I was researching it, I was researching my family history, which goes back to Spain. And my great grandmother, this would probably be about 26 or so generations ago, was escaping the Inquisition in Spain and was wandering through southeastern France when some robbers attacked her group. And Fradin came out. He was on a horse with a sword with some of his associates, and he fought off the attackers. And noticed my great grandmother, who was a beautiful woman at age 15, fell in love with her, got married, and then later on, King Louis VI uh, uh, King Philip VI appointed that Fradin a duke, a nobleman. And then following the customs of nobility in France, with the exception of ignoring the French Revolution, which got rid of nobility, which I refuse to acknowledge. As a result, I'm a duke, and that's why the book has my name as an author, is Duke
A Duke.
David Fradin.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna give you a big hand for being a Duke, Mr. David Fradin.
So some of the book covers the Book of Fradin, who were military men, priests, artisans, merchants, the mayor of Lyon. Uh, they also were wine growers, and the family seal, which is in there, depicts grapes. And Colonel Jean Fradin was appointed a lieutenant general by Napoleon. So it covers all of that type of history.
So, Mr. David, what will be your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
I've got one more book to do, and the title of it is Trippin, Trippin, and it will be a series of life's little laughs, funny things that have happened to me throughout my life.
You are most welcome to come back and to promote your upcoming book, Mr. David, and good luck for that. So, what insight does the book, Letter from My Hymie, offer about nature and human connection?
Well, my dad always thought there has to be a God if all you have to do is look at a leaf and see its complexity. He wrote a little article, which is in the book, about the grandeur of the Grand Canyon, which we visited on our little trip, the beauty of San Francisco, Yosemite, Yellowstone. Yellowstone, he fed a bear some hot sausage, and the bear got pissed and ran and drank the entire Yellowstone River. It was so hot. And the seeing Mount Rushmore, and next to Mount Rushmore, near Mount Rushmore, one sculptor was trying to build a sculpture of a famous Indian chief, and he worked his entire life on it. Didn't finish it, but they're still working on it today to get the whole thing done. So he talks about all of those kinds of things, including a little history of plumbing, which goes back to the word plumb in Latin, which means lead worker, and why the toilets these days are so short. It's because the Romans, he found in his study of the history of plumbing, were about 4 or 5 inches shorter than the average man or woman is today. And yet, despite all of that, the plumbing industry hasn't raised the height of the seat at all. And that probably explains why our legs fall asleep when we're doing our business.
Certainly. So, how does the book inspire readers to reflect on their own relationships and past communications?
I'm not sure it does that. I'd have to think about that. Uh,
Okay.
they probably, in some of the letters, they probably see little pieces of themselves and their families.
So, Mr. David, to wrap up our discussion for today, what is the lasting impact of Jaime's letters on the recipient and on the readers of the book?
I think it's the love for my mom, the love of life, the joy of nature, and the relationships with his family.
Yes, definitely. So, Mr. David Fradin, thank you so much for sharing letters from my honey to the world and looking forward for more books to come. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Yeah, they could go to my website, which is davidfradin.com, and all of my books are listed there, plus links to where you could go to get the printed copy, paper book, hardback, or the audio.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. David Fradin, because if you support him, more empowering books to come. So, Mr. David, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
More to come, people. See you soon.